much more can be said about the time of the Reformation.
很多可以说关于这个改教这个时期。
And from that point of view, I fall short of presenting the Reformation more.
所以我们讲到改教时期，现在要讲到改教之后时期了。
But we have only 5 days in this course.
但是因为时间关系，没办法在改教时期讲很多，所以时间只有5天嘛。
I'm going to move to the Post-reformation era.
所以我现在要进入这个改教之后时期，17世纪。
Now that does not mean that sometimes we return to the Reformation as a background and to discern continuities and discontinuities, but I want to make a switch now to clearly the Post-reformation era.
当然我们还是会随之过来，因为这是历史上不可分割有连续性，所以使用17世纪常常反反复复过来讲解。
So the first question that we face is, when did the Post-reformation era start?
第一个问题要问的是呢，什么是算是改教后这个时期的开始呢？
And dating certain periods is always very problematic.
定下这个时间通常是很困难的。
But in this case, I think we can define it closely.
在这个，我想在这个问题上，我们可以比较接近的定一个日期。
I think if we take the Council of Trent that ended in 1563.
如果我们想到这个对不起，这个 天特会议是在1563年结束。
We can argue that we have a hinge point in the history of the Christian Church, in the Western Church.
我们看到西方的基督教会史的话，我们可以这样说。
A hinge point where it became decisive what is the Roman Catholic teaching and what is not the Roman Catholic teaching.
可以说，至少从天特会议之后，我们可以说什么是罗马天主教的官方的教导，什么不是罗马天主教的教导，是改教家的教导。
It was also in the 1560s that we begin to see in the Protestant tradition a more clearer delineation between the Lutheran tradition and the Reformed tradition.
并且从1560年代之后，你发现呢，对于信仰告白的这些事情更清楚说明了路德宗跟改革宗不同所在。
I do not mention the Anabaptist or the so-called radical reformers.
我并没有提到这个重洗派所谓这个极端的这个改教运动啊。
Or the Anglican tradition in the Church of England.
或者是英格兰所谓圣公会的发展。
That have their own distinctives.
他们有自己的特色。
But if we restrict to say the 3 faith traditions of Roman Catholic, Lutheran, and Reformed.
但如果讲这个改教运动的主要的这个有当时来说有天主教、路德宗跟改革宗的话。
We begin to distinguish them more clearly in the 1560s of the 16th century.
所以在这个1560开始呢，之后就很清楚知道这3个天主教、路德宗、改革宗的这个特色不同所在。到17世纪就有这样结下去了。
Another argument to choose the 1560s as the beginning of the Post-Reformation era.
另外支持这个改教后的时代是从1560年代开始的话，有另外的理由。
Is making a distinction between the first generation of the people of the Reformation and the second generation of the people of the children of the Reformation.
所以这个也是作为划分什么是改教家第一代，什么是第2代改教家，那1560年代也是很好的划分点。
Say the students of the first generation of the reformers.
第2代就是说改教后是指改教家第1代的子孙啊。
Luther had passed away in 1546.
路德是在1546年过世。
Calvin had died in 1564.
加尔文是1564年过世。
And their students became the second and even the third generation.
他们的学生呢就变成下一代、第2代的在以后的改教家了。
And that even can be applied to the Roman Catholic tradition.
当然，这样的划分也可以用在罗马天主教。
Where the generation that was very involved in the Council of Trent between 1545 and 1563.
所以从1545到1563年开始天特会议作为划分点的话，
some of the early Roman Catholic theologians passed away in the 1560s.
就在1560年代这个天特会议之前，有些天主教重要的神学家也过世了。
And then the third criteria I would say that would advocate for the 1560s.
所以还有第三个原因，我说为什么可以说1560年代是划分的界限呢？
Is that in all three faith traditions, being it Roman Catholic, Lutheran or Reformed, we have major confessional statements.
也就是因为这三个主要，像天主教啦、路德宗、改革宗，在1560年代已经开始有具体的信仰告白了。
The outcome of the Council of Trent, the decrees and the canons of the Council of Trent in 1563 was a major statement of Roman Catholic teaching.
所以天主教来说，1563年这个作为天特会议的天特信仰告白，天特的这个信条、这个法规规定的话，已经清楚表明这个接下来罗马天主教是这样子的。
As we have seen this morning, the Belgic Confession, the Reformed Confession of 1561, became a major confessional statement in the 1560s.
在1561年的这个比利信条成为改革宗教会这1560年代开始的最主要的信仰告白。
And in the Lutheran tradition,
在路德宗传统呢
we have several confessions that culminated in the end in the formula of concord.
那从1560年代有许多的这个信仰告白，最后在协同书里面最后完整的表达出来。
Of concord.
这个协同书啊。
1577.
那这个是formula 这个是有协同条款，是1577年所制定的啊。
This first draft was already floating around in the 1560s.
那它的第一初稿在1560年代已经出现了。
So that is a Lutheran confession.
这是路德宗的这个协同条款。
So there is just a codification of teachings.
就是把这个各宗各派它的教训、教义呢，把它制定成为信条法典。
Through confessional statements.
借着这个信仰告白的表达。
In the Roman Catholic tradition, the Lutheran and the Reformed tradition.
无论是在天主教或者路德宗、改革宗传统里面。
Around the 1560s.
就是在1560年代。
So that is one. I think some of the criteria that I would offer for your consideration as saying this is the beginning of the Post-reformation era.
以上就是我说的原因。我们说1560年代开始进入改教后时期的这些理由。
So then the question can be, what is then the end of the Post-reformation era?
下一个问题是，那么到底改教之后时期什么时候结束？
That is very difficult.
那这是非常难回答的。
Some have argued in the Reformed tradition that is 1618, 1619.
那在改革宗传统，有人说是在1680、1690年代。
The end of the Post-Reformation period in the Reformed tradition is by the Synod of Dort.
那就是对不起，刚刚是说这个有人说这改教后时期是到1618到1619多特会议之后，这多特会议算结束了。
Where there is another codification of doctrine.
你看有这个多特信经的制定啊。
Particularly the doctrine so-called then on the doctrine of predestination.
特别是论到有关拣选预定的教义。
If that is the main issue of the Synod of Dort.
那这是这个多特会议的这个主要的这个论点。
And we will discover later this week that is maybe not the case.
如果我们这样想的话呢，也许你这样看法，那到我们周五晚上的多特会议，我会更仔细讲解，那个可能不是这样子的。
Some point that the end of the Post-Reformation era is in the 1648, 1649 with the codification of the Westminster Standards.
有人说这个改教后是到这个在新敏信大会在1640年代的时候制定新敏信仰告白是告一个段落了。
And some have argued that the year 1637 is the end of the Post-Reformation era.
那有人辩论说，在1537年是改教后时期的结束。
Why 1637?
为什么他会定1637年呢？
which work was published in 1637 that it became a watershed moment in philosophy? Which work was published in 1637 that became a watershed moment in philosophy?
什么文件，什么在1637年发表出来，成为这个重要的分水岭？1637年。
The work of René Descartes.
就是笛卡尔发表他的什么
The Discourse of Method.
就是这个方法讨论啊。
Which was published in 1637.
所以笛卡尔这本书是在1637年发表出来，所以有人说这是改教后时期的结束的时候。
I will lecture probably tomorrow about Cartesianism.
明天我会讲到笛卡尔主义是在讲什么
and explain why it is a very important moment in the history of philosophy.
为什么说1637年在哲学历史上是重要的时刻
So the end has been suggested us with various dates.
这些改教后时期的结束的日期是有不同的看法。
I will develop a proposal that will include, say, the possible end of the Post-reformation era.
我刚刚有讲，就是说如何来解释这个改教后时期结束有不同的这个提议跟看法。
Some Roman Catholic scholars,
这个罗马天主教来说
they define the Post-reformation in the Roman Catholic theology.
他们在罗马天主教的神学发展，他们如何定义什么叫改教后的这个时期结束
From about 1563 to the year 1800.
从1563到1800年左右
About 1800. Some scholars in Post-reformation studies,
所以他们说这是属于改教后时期的结束的时间
particular one very important figure, Richard Müller.
特别是这个重要的这个学者 Richard Muller 他说
He says the end of the Post-reformation period is about in 1790.
他认为这个改教后时期结束是大概是在1790年左右
So for this course,
为这门课做这门课而言
I define the Post-reformation era from about 1560 or 65 till about 1750.
我定义大概是改教后时期是从1565到1750年
A majority of scholarly literature define the Post-Reformation primarily in terms of Western Europe.
那么这些学者们研究什么是改教后时期，主要是定义在属于欧洲西部西欧来说
which include or not include England.
包含或不包含英格兰
I for myself propose that the Post-Reformation is a transatlantic and international phenomenon.
那我认为呢，改教后的这个时期发展是不只是在这个欧洲，是在这个大西洋的两岸边都有。
Which not only include Western Europe and England and Scotland.
这是国际性的，不只在西欧，在英格兰和苏格兰。
But also include New England.
也包含了新英格兰。
So it will include figures like Cotton Mather and Jonathan Edwards.
包含像这个跟Cotton Mather 还有这个爱德华兹啊。
So if this is the period of the Post-reformation era.
如果我们这样定义这个改教后时期是在这段时间的话，
I will describe briefly each of the faith traditions.
我会强调在每一个信仰传统里面
What happened in this time?
在这段时间发生了什么事情，
And with a particular attention to the Reformed tradition.
特别来注意到改革宗传统里面。
The Post-Reformation Roman Catholic.
那在这个改教后时期，罗马天主教呢，
We see from 1563 to about 1600 a time of consolidation.
从1563年到1600年，我们看到天主教是如何巩固它内部。
In the Roman Catholic Church, you see a very strong figure of reinstatement of doctrines, the doctrines of the Council of Trent.
所以他们非常强烈地坚持巩固的天德会议所揭示的这个罗马天主教信仰。
You see a very strong impulse of polemic theology over against the Protestants.
你看这时候天主教他们强烈地写出一些抗辩文章来反对这个抗罗宗。
But also in the period 1563 to about 1600, you see a very strong impulse of missionary movement of the Roman Catholic Church.
同时，1560年到1600年，你看天主教开始兴起这个海外宣教运动。
For the propagation of the gospel, the propagation of the doctrines of the Council of Trent.
他们特别要去传播他们的福音的天特会议所说的这个信仰。
And one particular group in the Roman Catholic Church was very instrumental in the missionary movement of the Roman Catholics.
那在这个天主教里面兴起一个运动，是非常强调这个宣教运动，
Which were the Jesuits.
所谓的耶稣会。
And that were the Jesuits who were the first that came to this part of the world, in East Asia.
是耶稣会先到这个亚洲东部来到这个地方。
It were the Jesuits who came to China.
耶稣会是也到了中国。
It were the Jesuits who came to Japan.
耶稣会到日本。
So the Jesuits were a missionary movement. They were the teachers of the doctrines of the Council of Trent.
所以耶稣会是天主教里面宣教运动的教导天特会议所宣告的信仰告白。
And through the missionary movement, they spread the teachings of the Roman Catholic Church.
通过这样子的宣教运动，把天主教的这个教义信仰传播到世界各地。
So that is the time following immediately the Council of Trent of 1563.
这是1560年之后，天主教里面立即展开了这个天特会议之后的运动。
The second phase in the Post-Reformation Roman Catholic tradition
在罗马天主教的这个改教会的这个时期里面，第二个时期是什么呢？
is from about 1620s to 1700.
是从1620左右到1700年。
Is a time of theological reflection.
是神学上的反思。
And beginning attention to biblical exegesis.
开始也来注重这个圣经解释。
And there are strong internal debates in the Roman Catholic Church.
在罗马天主教会内部有这种很强烈的辩论。
One particular movement is so-called Jansenism.
有一个特别的叫做杰森主义。
Jansenism.
一个中文翻译杰森主义。
Was called after the priest Cornelius Jansen.
是因为他当时领导的这个领袖叫做这个杰森这个神父啊。
Who wanted to return to the Augustinian doctrines of grace.
他希望能够回到奥古斯丁的恩典教义。
And he wrote a major work of 3 volumes called Augustine.
他写了3卷的这个巨著，讲的奥古斯丁文集。
So this is about the 1620s to the 1650s.
这大概是1620到1650之间所出版的。
Was an internal debate in the Roman Catholic Church.
这是罗马天主教内部的辩论。
In fact, there were many in the Reformed circles.
其实，在这个许多在改革中的这个圈子里的
that were hopeful that Jansenism would be a return of the Roman Catholic Church to the doctrines of grace.
也盼望这个杰森主义能够带领天主教回到奥古斯丁的这个信仰。
But in 1655, Jansenism was condemned by the Roman Catholic Church.
但是1655年呢，杰森主义被罗马天主教正式定罪。
And a return to the teachings of the Council of Trent were reinstated.
他们还是继续坚持，也回到了这个所谓天特会议所宣告的天主教的信仰。
And the third phase in the Roman Catholic Post-reformation era is from about 1700 to the late 18th century.
对天主教改教后运动的发展，这个第三时期就是从1710年到1800年左右。
Which no major doctrinal developments took place.
没有任何的教育上的发展。
Very little biblical exegesis.
很少这个圣经的注释解释。
And kind of a status quo of the teaching of the Council of Trent.
就是维持天特会议的天主教的这个信仰的维持原状。
Now, one important figure in the post-Reformation Roman Catholic tradition
在这个改教后期里面的罗马天主教里面有重要的一个领袖
is Robert Bellarmine，
名字叫做贝拉米主教。Bellarmine
very learned Roman Catholic scholar.
非常有学问的罗马天主教学者。
Lived from 1542 to 1621.
从这1542年到1621年才有年限的。
He was the main debater and polemic of the Roman Catholic side over against to the Protestants.
他的主要是使命就是罗马天主教主要来辩驳改教家的主要的领袖。
You have a question? Okay. You wrote catechetical instructions.
讲到这个所谓要理问答的这个教导。
Wrote works of piety.
讲到这个所谓敬虔的这个敬虔。
And some exegetical works.
以及有些解经工作是贝拉米所做的。
And if you would consult post-Reformation Reformed Theology.
所以讲到这个改教后之后这个改革宗神学
of the 17th century.
17世纪。
And when they debate Roman Catholic teachings.
他们辩论罗马天主教辩论。
They always go after Bellarmine.
那个对手主要就是都指向了贝拉米。
So Bellarmine is representative for the Roman Catholic teaching and the polemic over against to the Protestants.
因为这个贝拉米主要就是罗马天主教代表来反驳改教家的这个著作，也主要是他是主将。
Jansenism is dus an important development within the Roman Catholic Church.
所以杰森主义在罗马天主教里面是重要的一个想要反弹的运动。
And Jansenism, although it was condemned, was very influential in a part of northern France.
那么杰森主义虽然在罗马天主教被定罪，它的思想影响到法国北部还是很有影响力的。
And one of the well-known names that was acquainted with Jansenism
有一个有名的名字跟杰森主义有关系的
was Blaise Pascal.
就是有名的巴斯卡，沉思录的巴斯卡。
And when you read Blaise Pascal about the pensée, about thinking,
你知道这个巴斯卡写那个沉思录啊，这是这个思想家。
is a very pietistic devotional work.
这沉思录也是一个很具有这个敬虔的味道的这个灵修著作。
Not necessarily, actually, a Roman Catholic work.
所以也许不能说它一定是天主教里面的著作。
Pascal, in fact, is very Augustinian in his understanding of grace.
因为这个巴斯卡，他也反映出他对奥古斯丁的这个恩典的教育的认识。
But here you see that the influence of Jansenism had reached also northern France.
所以从他来看到，这杰森主义影响了巴斯卡，也影响了法国北部啊。
So much about post-Reformation Roman Catholic.
就说到以上就是关于改教后的这个时期里面罗马天主教的发生事情。
When we move to Roman post-Reformation Lutheranism,
我们进到这个改教后时期的这个路德宗发展。
We also can distinguish 3 periods.
我们可以同时区分三个时期。
And they are called by Lutheran scholars.
这是被路德宗的学者这样称呼。
The so-called Golden Age of Orthodoxy.
就说明是路德宗正统的这个黄金时代。
The High Orthodoxy.
是高教派的时代。
And the Silver Age of Orthodoxy.
还有是再低一点的银色时代啊。
And the Golden Age of Orthodoxy is defined of circa 1577.
在1577年被称为是路德宗高等这个高教派或者这个正统信仰的最黄金时期。
That is just a major statement. That's the formula of Concord, a major confessional statement.
那就是当时所谓协同条款、协同书的这个内容。
To about 1620.
到1621年。
The High Orthodoxy is a very short period between 1620 and 1648.
对，这个1620到1684年很短的时间呢，这个所谓的黄金时期。
Why 1648?
为什么这个1648年为什么这样
？Lutheran scholars argue
路德宗学者说
that in 1648 it was the end of the 30-year war.
因为1648年是30年战争打完的时候。
Which was one of the most destructive wars of the 17th century in Lutheran Germany.
那在路德宗的德国来说，17世纪最悲惨的战争就是这个30年战争。
And with the Peace of Westphalia in 1648, that came to an stop.
1648年那个所谓的那个西法利亚合约才停止的30年战争。
And then the Silver Age of Orthodoxy.
所以这个所谓银色时代呢
is the period of 1648 to about 1725.
就是从1648年到1725年，所谓的步入前面黄金时代是这个银色时代啊。
Which for Lutheran scholars is considered a decline of Lutheran orthodoxy.
那他们路德宗学认为这个时期就是原来这个黄金时代慢慢的这个下退，就是慢慢衰亡。
Now I have to. Did you find this in your handout? Post-reformation Lutheranism?
对，拿到讲义里面有一份叫做路德宗的改教后时期的神学。
Okay, if you have that, please take that. Then we go through.
那个要拿出来。
The scholar Robert Pruis.
这个写作这篇文章的作者那个 Pruis
is one of the foremost leading scholars in Lutheranism.
他是这个路德宗里面主要领袖的20世纪。
And particular post-reformation Lutheran studies.
特别是对路德宗在改教后时期的发展。
So if you open this package and you go to page 47 and 48.
你翻到47页、48页啊。
And following, you see major figures in the post-reformation Lutheran tradition.
可以看到这些在改教后的时期里面最主要的路德宗神学家。
I'm not going each one of them, but just to give you an idea.
不会每个一个讲，但至少你看到有这主要的这个观念。
A very important one is Martin Gemnitz on page 47.
第47页有一个重要的这个领袖叫做下面 Martin Gemnitz.
He was the one that theologically in systematic theology brought the Lutheran theology together.
他是这个系统学家，把路德宗神学整合的系统神学的。
Then on page 52,
第52页
we find a very important figure, Johann Gerhard.
我看到下面这个约翰叫 Gerhard.
Johann Gerhard was a very learned theologian, Lutheran theologian.
他是非常有学问的路德宗学者。
Was a university professor.
大学教授。
But he was most famous to be a pastor.
他最有名是他是牧师。
When he was a university professor, he received over 20 calls to serve a church.
所以他虽然大学教授，也教会的侍奉。有22个 22个招请他去教会做牧师。
Johann Gerrit was the first Lutheran theologian who introduced Aristotelian philosophy in theology.
他也是路德宗的主要的这个学者，将亚里士多德的这个经验这个方法引进整合路德宗思想。
Up to the time of Johann Gerrit, no Lutheran theology was using Aristotelian philosophy.
因为在他之前没有任何路德宗学者是使用亚里士多德的方法来做路德宗的神学，他开始的。
But Gerrit introduced it in Lutheran theology.
所以这个盖尔他就把这个亚里士多德思想带进整个路德宗神学。
And he wrote an enormous corpus of works.
他写了许多的丛书大书
For example, a 23-volume systematic theology.
比方说23卷的系统神学。
It's a very important figure in Lutheran theology.
是非常重要的路德宗的这个学者。
Let me see. Then another one in page 59.
第59页。
Abram Kaloff.
讲到上面一个Abram Kaloff
is one of the best representative of the so-called Silver Age of Lutheran Orthodoxy.
这个称为是这个所谓路德宗银色时代最重要的代表人物。
And was really a consolidator of Lutheran theology.
继续巩固路德宗的神学。
So, where was Lutheran theology taught in Germany?
所以就这些路德宗的神学在德国的教导。
If you go to page 66 on the end,
就是找到第66页的话
you see an overview where the centra of the universities in Germany that were Lutheran universities that taught the Lutheran theology in the Post-reformation Lutheran
在改教后时期里面，在路德宗大学、伦敦堡等等这些其他大学所看到的。
That's Wittenberg, Tübingen, Strasbourg, Leipzig and Jena.
最主要是有维登堡啦、杜比根啊、莱比锡啊、耶拿这几个学校。
So, if you talk about post-Reformation Lutheranism, this is the information sheet of different figures and works of post-Reformation Lutheranism.
论到改教后时期路德宗的神学的话，这份资料很重要，讲到这些不同的这些理论学者的等等的著作。
So what we see here immediately,
立即就看见到
which we will see in a minute in the post-Reformation Reformed era.
在我们看改革中的这个之前
all those universities are only in Germany.
这些大学都是在德国
and this is just only German speaking.
这都是说德文的
Yes, the teaching was in Latin,
当然教导要用拉丁文
but it was a single language.
但是它是同一个
A single language environment, the German context.
这是在同一个语言德文的环境里面
Well, the Reformed theology is very international.
但是呢，改革中的这个神学呢，却是在各地国际性的不同语言的地区。
The centers of learning are Geneva,
这个学习的中心是在内瓦
Heidelberg in Germany,
海德堡德国
so Switzerland, Germany.
瑞士德国
Many 5 universities of Reformed character in Holland. 5 universities of Reformed character in Holland, in the Netherlands.
在荷兰有5个改革中特色的大学。
We have St Andrews University in Scotland.
在这个苏格兰有圣安德鲁大学
where Reformed teaching was taking place.
在那时候是非常改革中的教导。
We see it in Cambridge, Massachusetts, in New England.
我看在这个新英格兰麻州剑桥大学也是教导改革中神学的。
So the Reformed teaching is international and transatlantic.
所以改革中的这个神学是大西洋两岸国际性的。
Which is very different than Lutheranism that is primarily focus on Germany.
不像德国路德宗是主要集中在德国的大学里。
So, speaking about Post-reformation Lutheranism,
所以讲到这个路德宗在改教后时期的发展，
what is then the theological essence of each of the period?
所以在这个德国路德宗里面，在这段时期到底每一个时期它的神学的这个精华本质在哪里？
When we talk about Lutheran Orthodoxy,
当我们说到路德宗的正统信仰，
we have to say overall,
我们说的是到总的来说，
there is a strong and strict adherence to the teaching of Luther.
极端的就是要继续坚持路德的教导。
Which we will see in the Reformed tradition.
当然，对照来说，在改革宗传统里面
Calvin is one of the figures.
加尔文只是一个领袖之一而已。
There is a lesser, stricter following of exactly Calvin.
不是说每一件事都是坚持加尔文讲，照他来说。
If you compare to Lutheranism.
对照路德宗就不一样了。
And that is in part because of Philip Melanchthon.
那主要原因是因为路德宗有莫兰顿。
In the golden age of Orthodoxy, so the first phase following Luther's death,
在路德过世之后，路德宗这个正统这个信仰的最高黄金时期的话，
Luther's doctrinal formulation was codified by Philip Melanchthon in the Lodzi Communis.
所以路德的思想主要在这个路德宗的莫兰顿的这个笔下写成这个所谓他的神学教科书里表达出来。
Which we could call the first Protestant systematic theology.
那也可以称为是抗罗宗第一本系统神学。
So he divided his systematic theology.
所以他这样子来分类处理他的系统神学内容。
Speaking about the doctrine of God.
讲到神论。
Speaking about the doctrine of creation.
讲到创造论。
Anthropology.
人论。
And sin.
罪论。
And then Christology.
与基督论。
And redemption.
还有这个救赎论。
The basic pattern of Protestant theology.
是基本上是抗罗宗神学的这个架构。
But a very strong adherence to Luther's doctrinal teaching.
是非常清楚是要守住路德的教训。
Now, to this strong adherence to the doctrinal teaching of Luther,
要这个极端的强烈的持守路德的这个教训
was a reaction.
也就是有反应啊，反弹的。
And particularly by the figure of Johann Arndt. Johann Arndt.
特别是这个约翰这个人
Sometimes called the father of pietism.
特别有时候被称为是这个敬虔主义之父。
Johann Arndt lived from 1555 to 1621.
他从1555年到
1555 to 1621.
1621年。
His main concern was in the Lutheran theology.
但这个从路德宗的神学来看的话，他主要的关切的是
that people were overly concerned with orthodoxy.
他认为这个路德宗里的人太多是强调这个路德的神学，这个系统神学这些信条信念。
And orthodoxy means right teaching.
那所谓这个正统是表示这个对的教训，叫 Orthodoxy。
Orthodoxy, the right teaching.
所以这两个合在一起 ，ortho 是正确的，然后 doxy 是教训、教义。
Johann Arndt's concern was we need orthopraxis.
那这个约翰阿他的这个强调是我们需要是正统的实行啊
，the right living，
正确的活着啊。
It is a very important figure in the history of Lutheranism.
所以这个阿这个人在路德宗的这个发展上是重要的一个领袖。
The father of pietism.
被称为是敬虔主义之父。
the emphasis on the essence of the Christian life.
你看，强调基督徒生活的本质是要敬虔。
So not only the right teaching is important,
不只是这个正确教导是重要的，
but the right living is important.
那这个正确的活着也是重要的。
So Johann Arendt wrote many devotional works.
所以这个阿兰他写了许多这个操练敬虔的著作。
And one of the followers of Johann Arendt
那他的跟随者其中之一
was Philip Jacob Spener.
就是说有名的这个施本尔。
Philip Jacob
施本尔。
Spener. And for some, this is the father of pietism.
有些人就称他为是敬虔主义之父。
I don't know. One of the two. Or both.
两个都是，the other is grandfather.
But important is both are promoters of pietism, meaning the right living is very important to
我
them.
们这两个人都是敬虔主义之父，一个是主父，一个是父，所以呢，总而言之，都强调要有这个敬虔的生活很重要。
They were concerned that in the preaching and the teaching of the Lutheran doctrines,
他们认为在教导和传讲路德宗的这个信念的这个教义正统教义的时候，
people ended up with the right doctrines,
大家得到听得到我们要有正确的教义，
with head knowledge only,
只有头脑的知识，
but not with the right living.
没有真正实践正确活出来。
So those two were very important. They say not only the right teaching is important, but the right living is
他
important.
们两位跟我奉献说，除了这个纯正教义重要之外，这个敬虔生活也是一样重要的。
And maybe I will come back in a minute and we will do some reading about Spener.
所以我们有个讲义有讲的这个敬虔主义的，待会儿就回来讲的敬虔主义的这个讲义啊。
So the theological essence of the golden age of Orthodoxy is a strict adherence to the doctrines of the teaching of Martin Luther.
路德宗的神学继续持守这个马丁路德的教训。
What about the High Orthodoxy?
这是讲到这个
In the High Orthodoxy, we see a clarification of the Lutheran doctrinal position.
所以在路德宗这个这个正统是高峰时期是继续传讲解释路德的这个神学。
And a doctrinal teaching expressed in systematic theology.
这个教义的讲解是从系统神学表达出来的。
We see an adaptation of Aristotelianism, what I have mentioned, by Johann Gerhard.
我们看看刚说的，哈尔把这个亚里士多德的这个经验思想方法引进来整理路德的神学。
Which was strongly opposed by Martin Luther.
当然，这个是路德本人说是坚决反对这个亚里士多德的这个经验哲学方式。
But now became part of theology in Lutheran theology.
那现在却成为路德宗的这个神学里面的这个主要的这个部分了。
And it was in this time in the High Orthodoxy.
这就是所谓在高峰时期。
The growing concern by Johann Arendt about the right teaching and the right living.
同时，另一方面产生一个强调，正统教义之外，更是要有这个敬虔的生活也开始了。
Thus we can say that the roots of pietism
我们看见这个，我们可以说到这个敬虔主义
are in the High Orthodoxy.
是在这个路德宗里面，在高峰时期所产生的这个回应。
And if you look in the history of the church,
注意看这个教会历史的发展。
From the Patristic time onwards.
从早期教父时期发展，直到现今。
And if this is right doctrine,
是这个要纯正的教义。
If this is right living,
所以要有这个正确的生活。
You see in the history of the church this.
你看到这个教会历史像钟摆一样，在两端之间荡来荡去啊。
There are times that the right doctrine is defined clearly.
有的时候呢，这纯正教义讲解得很清楚。
For example, in the time of the creeds.
特别是在制定信经信仰告白的时候
or confessions
信经信条
or church councils
或者教会的会议
and then people become concerned about the right living
那然后就反弹过来人们开始关心这个要有这个纯正的这个生活
For example here the Donatists
比方说在早教会有这个多纳主义
in the time of Augustine
奥古斯丁的时候
here for example Pietism
我们举例是属于敬虔主义
of in the 17th century in the Reformed tradition Puritanism
或者说路德宗的敬虔主义在17世纪改革宗里面有所谓清教徒运动
So you see this swing
所以你看到这个钟摆这样子荡来荡去这两端之间
So you can find out for yourself where you are
所以你可以自己想想你是怎么回事情况
You're very serious
所以你现在荡在哪一边呢你要想清楚
So what is the theological essence of the Silver Age of Orthodoxy?
这是路德宗这个属于银色时代的时期的特色
We see a rise of systematic theological handbooks.
我们看到这个有系统神学的著作出现
We see a stronger contrast between orthodoxy and pietism.
我们看到另外也有这个反弹就是说在这个正统信仰和这个敬虔生活之间
Some of the professors at the university, they start to read Johann Arndt and Philip Spener.
有些这个路德宗这个大学的教授开始读 Arndt 跟斯本尔的这些灵修敬虔著作
And some of the Lutheran theologians rejected pietism completely.
有些路德宗的这个神学家的彻底的反对拒绝这敬虔运动
But also what we see in the Silver Age of Orthodoxy,
同时我们看到在这个属于银色时代里面的
although there is a defense of the thought of Luther,
虽然我们看的确是继续辩护这个持守路德的教训
there is an increase of polemics with the Reformed.
但是也增加了开始就对这个改革宗信仰的这个辩驳反弹就是反对改革宗信仰
And there's a real tension between orthodoxy and pietism.
但是也有这个所谓路德宗正统信仰和这个敬虔生活的之间的这个争辩这些对抗
Now, how did that play out in society, orthodoxy and piety?
那这个正统信仰跟敬虔生活在社会里面如何展现出来呢
A very good example or illustration in Western history
那在西方历史上有个很好的一个例证可以表明出来
is music,
是音乐
and particularly the music of Johann Sebastian Bach.
特别是这个有名的音乐家巴哈他的音乐的拿出来
Did you ever hear of Bach?
你喜欢听过巴哈的音乐吗
Thank you. We can now do a cantata. Okay. And we are done for the day. So. Cantata is a gospel. No, sorry. Okay.
我们可以听巴哈的这些音乐是来说是福音的表达
Who likes Bach?
谁喜欢巴哈
First the psalm.
Pardon me?
First the psalm, I think.
First the Psalms and then Bach? No, Bach did not know the Psalms. Well, okay. Now here we have a combination of orthodoxy.
巴哈是代表他是有正统的信仰
and piety.
以及有敬虔生活
Johann Sebastian Bach had a library.
所以那个巴哈这个图书馆
And in that library we find the works of Adriaan Neele,
你可以找到卡洛夫
one of the figures that is a song in Lutheran Orthodox.
刚刚我们读到这个重要的路德宗改教后的这个神学家
And Kalov wrote a Bible commentary,
卡洛夫写了一本圣经注释
which was heavily used by Bach in composing the cantatas.
所以是这个巴哈用这本书来编他的这个看他的这个神剧这个大的曲子
But Bach had also all the works of Johann Arndt.
巴哈也读这个 Arndt 这个金钱主义之父的书啊。
Very pietistic works.
是非常敬虔的这个。
So you see in the music of Bach.
所以你看到在巴哈的音乐里面
，that Lutheran orthodoxy and Lutheran piety comes together.
路德这个正统信仰和路德这个敬虔生活结合在一起
，and is expressed in music.
在音乐中表达出来。
And in my opinion, humble opinion, very nice music.
对我来说，我谦卑表，我非常喜欢，是非常好的音乐。
But I also can say the same can be said of other composers in the Lutheran churches.
当然，这也可以论到有些路德中其他的这些作曲家。
A very important other figure besides Bach was Buxtehude.
那个巴哈之外，另外一个重要的音乐家是 Buxtehude，
who is doing the same orthodoxy and piety together.
他也同样把这个正统信仰跟敬虔生活结合在一起音乐里表达出来。
Although sometimes he is more emphasizing the piety.
甚至有时候更加强调这个敬虔
than the orthodoxy.
比强调正统教义更多。
So, in music is this a very important thing where orthodoxy and piety comes together.
在音乐里面很重要，这个纯正的信仰跟敬虔生活结合在一起。
And also in the Lutheran tradition,
同时在路德传统里面
you have hymn writers.
还有这些所谓这个
very famous hymn writers.
圣诗作曲者。
Also a Gerhard, not Johann Gerhard, but another Gerhard.
另外一个叫 Gerhard 的人
wrote many hymns, very orthodox in theology, but very pietistic in expression.
写了很多这个诗歌都是正统的教义，但是有敬虔的表达。
Okay, so music is a very good example to illustrate orthodoxy and piety.
所以音乐是很好的一个表达方式，把正统教义和敬虔生活表达出来。
You don't have to read a lot of Latin works.
你不需要读很多拉丁文著作。
You just can listen to music.
你不需要读那些著作，你就只要听一个音乐就可以了，比今天这些敬拜赞美短歌好太多了。
But this is just the context of Post-reformation Lutheran orthodoxy.
所以这是所以巴哈所属的是在这个改教后时期这个路德宗的这个信仰里面的。
And in the Lutheran circles, they have Johann Sebastian Bach.
在路德宗来说，他们很喜欢这个巴哈。
We don't have a Bach in the Reformed circle.
很可惜，在改革宗传统里没有巴哈。
Because he only sings psalms.
因为我们只唱诗篇。
Excuse me.
Yeah.
How you position the Thomas à Kempis related to anything?
Oh, okay, good.
说到这个汤马肯皮斯如何这个是和这些有关联在一起
Thomas à Kempis.
是汤马斯肯皮斯的。
Thomas à Kempis is a late medieval figure.
他是中世纪晚期的人物。
Who wrote a very important work.
他写了一本重要的书。
The Imitatio Christi.
就是效法基督这本书。
The imitation.
是拉丁文imitatio
of Christ.
那么英文翻译叫做imitation of Christ。
Imitatio Christi.
中文翻译叫效法基督。
In this work, there's 3 or 4 books.
这卷书里面分成3到4部分
where he not only describes the life of Christ,
强调就是描述基督的生平
but how we should imitate the life of Christ as Christian.
重点还不是描述基督的生活中你如何去效法基督生活。
This book is questionable.
第4部分是很有问题的。
Did he write it? Did he not write it?
Sorry.
Did he write the part or did he not write the part?
第4部分是他自己写的还是别人加上去？ 不知道。
It has some very specific Roman Catholic teaching, like the doctrine of Mary.
所以特别在第四课里面讲到一些天主教教训的什么崇拜玛利亚啊，这部分不知道是谁，可能是他写的或者别人写的。
But the first 3 parts are very Christological and very scriptural.
那前面3部分是比较以基督为中心，比较合乎圣经的。
How we as Christians should imitate Christ.
一个基督徒应该如何效法基督
For example, when we go through suffering,
比方说我们看到基督的受难，
we should call to mind the sufferings of Christ.
所以我受了苦难患难，我想到跟基督耶稣患难的关系。
And not only to recall the sufferings of Christ,
不只是去回想基督耶稣的
but to see our suffering in the perspective of what He has done for us.
思想他为我们所成就的。
So in fact we could say a very reformational essence of theology in those 3 books.
所以我们可以说，甚至有改教的思想在这个书里面。
Now Thomas à Kempis belonged to a certain movement.
这个坎皮斯属于一个运动里面。
The so-called Devotio Moderna.
这叫做灵修新路。
The modern devotion.
是灵修的新的方法。比较就中世纪旧的方法来说，叫灵修新路。
Modern devotion，
就是英文翻译就叫做当代灵修现代灵修。
It was a kind of a monastic, a semi-monastic movement.
它是一个半修道运动，就是
brothers of the modern devotion, they lived in monasteries.
他们是有住在修道院的。
But they were serving in the society.
也可以在社会
as teachers or other vocations.
或者在教学校教书或者等等，就是共同生活的弟兄会。
And Thomas à Kempis was a teacher for many monasteries and churches.
所以肯定是在修道院里，他也在各地教导。
And this movement had in mind
这个共同生活弟兄会这个运动
a simple Christian living,
强调了基督徒简朴生活
a Christ-like living
是要效法基督的生活
in the service of society.
要来服侍社会上人的
That is the essence of the devotion, modern devotion.
这所谓灵修新路这种运动里面的
And this work was very important for the representative for the modern devotion
所以
movement.
这本效法基督这本书就等于是这个共同生活弟兄会灵修新路的代表作。
Now, what is interesting in this work?
在这本书里面的这个有意思是
Johann Arndt based his own works on Thomas à Kempis' work.
所以这个约翰二这个敬虔主义之父，他的著作是根据效法基督这种灵修新路的方式来写的，
Particularly the Christ-like living.
特别是效法基督的生活。
So, the reception of this work
所以这本书被广泛被接纳，
found its way in Post-reformation Lutheranism.
在路德宗的改教后期，这个改教后时期也被接纳。
But the largest reception of this book,
是
the largest reception of this book
这个最大的接纳这本书的所在，
was in Post-reformation Reformed Theology.
其实是在这个改教后期里面，改革宗传统里面。
This book was in the 17th century. In the 17th century, in the Reformed circles in Western Europe.
这本书在17世纪的这个改教后期这个改革宗这个圈子里面有很大的影响。
This book was highly praised,
这本书被基督的这个赞赏，
widely read,
大家都读，
and many times published again.
许多的时候都这样做。
So here we have a late medieval Roman Catholic book.
所以这个天主教的著作是中西晚期就确实被这些改教后期的这些改革宗的人来买来阅读。
That focuses on Christian living,
因为他强调的是基督徒的生活，
and that finds its way in the Post-Reformation Lutheranism,
因为他也在这个改教后期这个路德宗里面展现出来，
and it finds its way in Post-Reformation Reformed theology.
也在改教之后的时期里面的改革宗传统里面表达出来。
In fact, the principal of the university in Utrecht.
事实上，这个荷兰的 Utrecht 大学的这个校长
Sorry about the name. Gisbertus Fuchsius.
他的名字
Gisbertus Fuchsius.
有名字是 Fuchsius， 是一位荷兰大师。
Writes at the opening of the university in 1636.
在大学开始的时候，这个1636年这个演讲词里面
Our campus is the best book in the world.
他说这个康马给的这本书是世上最好的书，
With the exception of part 4.
除了第4部之外，把它拿掉了。
This is the leading Reformed theologian at that time in Europe.
在当时来说，对啊 ，Purtian 是欧洲出名的最有领袖的这个改革宗大师。
So here we see again, and thank you for the question.
谢谢你提出他们的民族问题。
Here we see an example of continuity.
所以这里看见这所谓这个连续性的发展啊。
A continuity of piety.
这个敬虔的这个需要和教导连续的
from the late medieval period
从中世纪晚期
to post-reformation Lutheranism and Reformed
到改教后的时期的路德宗主义和改革宗主义都有影响。
And very instrumental in the thought of Johann Arndt.
特别是在这个今天主义之父 Arndt 里的著作里表达出来了。
Does that answer your question?
回答你的问题吗？
Thank you. Thank you very much.